think we're ready to go. Okay, good. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2017 New York City water rate. My name is Greg Acerto, and I will serve as the hearing officer for today's meeting. First, I'd like to take just a minute to give a brief overview. First, please note that we place certain documents into the official record maintained by the Water Board. The first is the notice designating me as the hearing officer. Also, a copy of the public notice, which listed this hearing, and an affidavit of publication of such notice. Also included is the report on the cost of supplying water to Upstate customers for the 2017 rate year. And the final exhibits are the written statements submitted by you, the members of the public. So far, we've received 2 written statements, one from Suez Water Westchester, and one from Joel Dickler Law Firm. In just a moment, we will hear a presentation from the Water Board's Executive Director, Mathilde McLean. Then we will open the meeting up to hear from you, the members of the public. Before we start, I'd just like to introduce Omar Nazem. He's the board's new treasurer. And I'd also like to acknowledge in the audience we have the board's rate consultant, Ed Marcus and Sean Lynn. And we're also privileged to have Steve Lawitz, DEP's Chief Financial Officer with us. First Deputy Commissioner. Sorry. If you have not yet signed up to speak but would like to, please take a moment to do so. The registration is at the table. And finally, you can also submit written testimony to the New York City Water Board. You have up until the close of business on May 12th. Any statements will be entered into the record, and copies will be distributed to the Water Board members for their review and consideration prior to the adoption of the fiscal year 2017 rate. With that said, I would now like to welcome Mathilde McLean to give us a presentation on the 2017 rate.
Good morning. So we're all here about a month earlier this year than normal, which I really appreciate the hard work of Amawalk in helping us put together this rate report earlier and get this proposal out. For many years, you've made a request that we try to speed things up and have a rate proposal before and a hearing before June. So this is maybe a month earlier. The green cherry blossoms and red maples on the way. To start, I'll give a brief overview of the system. The water supply system for New York City supplies 1 billion gallons of water each day to 8.5 million people in New York City and nearly another 1 million people upstate or here north of the city. There are 3 reservoir systems with 19 storage reservoirs and 3 controlled lakes. These have a capacity of 580 billion gallons. We have 182,000 acres of New York City owned land and easements in the watershed, plus an additional 35,000 acres of reservoir area. There are also 7 wastewater treatment plants to treat water in the surrounding areas for these reservoirs. And there are 295 miles of aqueducts and tunnels. So overall, it's a substantial system that is our water supply system here. DEP's capital plan is $12.3 billion over the next 5 years from 2016 through 2020 and $16.8 billion through 2025. And yes, that's B as in billion. So it's a tremendous capital program to support the water and sewer systems. That does include the sewer system in city, but it's a large capital program. One of the main projects is the Delaware Aqueduct repair over the coming 10 years. That's going to be about $1 billion that we are investing in repairing a leak in the Delaware Aqueduct. This repair will, the main part of it, which we are hoping to work with you, the Upstate wholesale customers, is the shutdown of the tunnel in around 2022, when we will have to shut the tunnel down for months. The Delaware Aqueduct supplies about 50% of the city's drinking water needs in the overall system. So that is a major capital program to which we are working for. In 2016, regarding the Delaware Aqueduct repair, DEP completed construction of shafts at each end of the bypass tunnel. We also completed interconnection facilities that will transfer water from the Delaware to the Catskill Aqueduct. In the coming year, we will complete the design of the rehabilitation of the Upper Catskill Aqueduct. We will commence construction of the bypass tunnel. That contract has already been bid and registered. We will start the shutdown management plan for the Rondell West Branch bypass tunnel. And we will continue our programs to reduce water consumption by approximately 5%. Another major investment in the reservoir system is the filtration avoidance determination that we secured and the watershed programs that go along with that. In 2007, we secured a 10-year filtration avoidance determination that exempts DEP from requirements to filter water from the Catskill and Delaware systems. We were required to filter water from the Croton system, and for that we built the Croton filtration plant. But for the FAD, we were able to construct the ultraviolet disinfection facility, which saved a tremendous amount of money as opposed to with the UV disinfection as opposed to full filtration. We have commenced renewal discussions for the FAD with the EPA and the New York State Department of Health, and we must submit a long-term program for our watershed protection by December of this year. We have $179 million in the capital plan to continue to make investments in watershed protection. Another significant area of investment for us in the water supply system is dam reconstruction and rehabilitation. We have $460 million in our capital plan for dam reconstruction. One of the most significant projects is the reconstruction of dams on the Ashokan Reservoir. For that, we have $234 million set aside. And we also have been rehabilitating the Gilboa Dam. The work on this was completed 2 years ahead of schedule on one of the contracts, and we continue to work on the dam's lower level outlet and other improvements. Overall, the wholesale customers north of the city consume about 10% of the daily distribution of the water supply system. In 2015, the wholesale customers consumed about 112 million gallons a day, which is 11% less than they consumed in 2001.
What year was that?
2015, 112 million a day. And in 2001, it was about 126.
Their fiscal year, too.
This is about fiscal year, yes.
Okay.
So the year ending, our fiscal year is June 30th of each year. So one of the main, as mentioned, one of the main programs that we have been doing is a demand management program. We've made significant investments in city, and also we've been working with upstate communities to try to drive a 5% reduction in consumption by 2019. 8 communities have signed agreements with us to participate in the demand management planning. We have a consultant on board, Water Demand Management, who has been working with these communities to produce demand management plans. And with those plans and the initiatives set forth in them, DEP is also offering funding to invest in such projects that come out of those plans. There was an announcement a couple weeks ago by the town of Austin, which has plans pretty much ready to go, and they'd be eligible for about $300,000 worth of funding for that. So moving on to the rates, since this is a rate hearing. Wholesale water is sold to about 40 customers north of the city, which distribute that water to about 70 different communities that they serve. The communities are entitled to take a daily amount of water that's equal to the New York City per capita consumption times their population. And that amount of water is billed at the entitlement rate. The entitlement rate is based on the capital and operating costs of supplying water, excluding all costs that are for distribution and treatment in the city, and divided by the total forecast consumption of both in-city and wholesale consumption north of the city. To note, that entitlement rate does not include, and hasn't included in the past, many costs that we incur, such as the operations and maintenance reserve fund, which has to be funded at 1/6 of our annual operations and maintenance costs. It also hasn't included additional funds that we have to provide coverage on our bonds. We have more than 29.8 billion in outstanding debt, and so we have additional cash to provide coverage, and the entitlement rate does not include or has not included any allotment for that. Those costs are in the excess rate, which is set at the rate for the water consumed inside New York City. So last year we introduced, each year we reconcile for the costs from the 2 fiscal years previous. This current 16-year rate, we reconciled for the costs that had been in fiscal year 14. Fiscal year 14 closed, and the final costs were available to compare the 16 rate. This year we're reconciling in the 17 rate for the 15 costs. Last year we began, we proposed to the board that reconciliation be spread over 4 years. There had been concerns that because of certain costs that we had, such as the buyback of debt or debt defeasance, that the reconciliation was too large and it impacted the customers. So we proposed last year to spread that reconciliation over 4 years. And the proposal this year is again the same, to spread the 2015 reconciliation over 4 years of the rate from fiscal year 17 through fiscal year 20. So to calculate the entitlement rate, we take the cost of treating water, mentioned on the previous slide, and we forecast consumption. This year, for fiscal year 17, we project that the cost will be $662 million for the water supply. The reconciliation from fiscal year 15 and the fiscal year 14 reconciliation as well are about $21 million added onto that cost, which gives us a total of $683 million to supply water. We project that consumption will be about 390 billion gallons, and then that results in a rate of $1,750.52 per million gallons, which is a 1.25% rate increase over the fiscal year 16 rate. When we look at our costs that go into that 662 million of base costs, the largest component is debt service. About $242 million is what we will spend on debt service for the water supply system. Overall, the system's debt service from 2005 to 2015 doubled. During that time, we committed about $23.3 billion to capital projects. This year, we are issuing about $1.7 billion of debt for new projects. Next year, we're projected to issue $1.8 billion of debt for new projects. Over the same period, one of the pies here, we also pay about $163 million a year in real estate taxes for our watershed lands. Another piece of the pie that we discuss every year at these rate hearings is capital construction, cash used for capital construction or debt defeasance, and that is about 5% of the cost, or $34 million. Over the past 6 years, we have refinanced and bought back $11.1 billion of debt, achieving $5.4 billion of savings. This year, with regards to defeasance related to the cost of water supply or overall debt defeasance that applies to the Upstate calculation, we're looking at about $750 million of debt defeasance. This defeasance we expect to save $1.4 billion, which is about $1.47 of savings for every dollar we spend. So we're issuing $1.7 billion of new debt, we're defeasing $750 million. It's all part of an overall financial plan to maintain our ratings on our bonds so that this cost of debt service stays somewhat reasonable and does not grow tremendously. Overall, the changes in the water service costs, the water supply costs, from 16 to 17 are not projected to change all that much. The net total cost of service is an increase of about 0.5%, and the consumption is projected to decline by about 0.75%, which results in the rate increase proposal of 1.25%. Last year at this time, we projected that the rate increase for fiscal year 17 would be 4.61%. So this is a 78% decrease from that projection. The other rate that is charged, as I mentioned, when a community goes above the entitled consumption, is the excess rate. The proposal for the excess rate, often we have this rate hearing after the NCD rates have already been adopted, but this year it is before that adoption. This is actually our first rate hearing of 6 different hearings in the coming week. But the proposal for the excess rate is an increase of 2.1% to $5,200.53 per million gallons. And over time, the rate increase for the entitlement rate has been greater than the rate increase for the excess rate when you look at the compounded 5-year average rate increase. However, the entitlement rate is done based on the entitlement rate calculation that is in the cost of service report, which you all have. The history of such reports is available on our water board website. The water supply costs, when we look at the different communities within the city, the water supply costs comprise between 17 and 56% of the residential water charges for the wholesale communities. And this proposed increase of 1.25% would be an increase for the average single family in the cost of water supply of about $1.72 per year. The increase in the excess rate is about $8.56 per year for the average single family, and we assume that the average single family uses approximately 80,000 gallons a year. So that is the end of the presentation and the rate proposal. If you have any comments, as Greg mentioned, please, if you did not give us testimony today, or if you do not present testimony for the reporting, please submit any written comments to us by May 12th at 5 o'clock, and the board will consider the rate proposal on May 20th. May 20th is the scheduled water board to adopt next year's budget rates.
Yeah, I have one question. When you mentioned that it was an 11% decrease from 2001 to 2015 in the daily consumption, what year in that 14-year period was the city fully on the automated meters?
The automated meters, 2011, I believe.
Around, it was early 2012 that we had reached 90% coverage or better.
So it's fair to say around 2012, 13?
Yes, we began the implementation in 2009.
Yes.
And it was completed in 2012.
So what I'm wondering is that when the increase really took off, or was it a gradual or decrease really Was it a gradual decrease, or did it spike up in 2013 or so?
Sure, when we look at this chart, this, I think that was 2008. But it's really, the in-city has been pretty stable as well in the recent years in terms of consumption and where it's been. So I think it's a 17% decrease from 2001 in city and 11% north of the city. But when you look at this chart, it hasn't decreased substantially more.
Yeah, I'm just trying to speculate whether
Sure. It's
the
been
automatic meter reading
Sure.
affected the reduction in use, or was it happening anyway?
It was about an 8% reduction up to 2008, and then about 9 after, so roughly half and half.
But we have seen the automated meter reading, just as a discussion about AMR, we have seen a dramatic decrease in our billing disputes in the city.
That I can.
That has been
Right,
fabulous.
but most of us have been looking at the demand management, that one of the things that would manage demand better would be the automatic meter reading, but it doesn't appear to have had that effect in New York City.
So if I could just expand on that a bit. So I think in summary, when we had saturated coverage with AMR beginning in early 2012, we continued to see this the long-term decline in consumption continue. While we were installing AMR on many individual accounts, after AMR was installed, we saw increases in consumption because we were also replacing half of our meters with new meters. And so we received, I would probably guess, hundreds, if not hundreds of complaints about how did my water consumption increase so much. But the overall decline trend continued, but on an individual customer base, we saw spikes.
We did, I think we replaced 420,000 meters of less than 2 inches and more than 36,000 meters of 2 inches or greater.
Well,
So
the concern I
so you
have
see
is
the
that
pickup.
we've been negotiating the demand management programs, and most of us are inclined or have committed to go with the automatic meter reading, which part of the equation may show an increase in consumption. The opposite effect of what we're trying to do, because we're replacing old meters with newer meters that are not under reading. And then by the same token, we hope to have a decrease as a result of being able to detect leaks much quicker when they get repaired. So the degree of concern I have is the two may cancel each other out, and you may see no decline. And yet that's what we're aiming for.
Well, and the improvement in tracking consumption would also be. So if you get, when you have a new meter, you actually know better the volume that's going through, as well as you can see that.
Yeah, we also, when we installed AMR and customers subscribed to the automated leak notification, I forgot how many thousands of automated leak notifications we've issued, but
It's more than $85 million
$85
of
million.
savings.
Yeah, so that they've saved.
Yes.
So we've estimated that the automated leak notification saved the customers collectively $85 million. Those to whom we send the automated leak notifications, as compared to the old method pre-AMR, when their first clue that they had a leak was when they received their quarterly bill.
And it might have been an estimated bill for several quarters and then an actual bill when we finally got it. Yes.
Can I ask one question? You indicated what the excess rate is proposed and what the entitlement rate is proposed. and the city or the water board has not approved the in-city rate. If the in-city rate is approved lower than the excess rate you're proposing, does that mean the excess rate that you are proposing will be that in-city rate?
Yes, it does, Mr. Hackney. The public notice is written such that the water board will consider an increase of up to 1.25% for the entitlement rate and 2.1% for the excess rate. So they will be kept in tandem.
Thank you, Mattia. And now, the next part, we will have our first public speaker, which is Mr. Joel Dichter. If you like, I believe you can just slide the microphone in front of you or switch seats. It's up to you.
Thank you, Chair, for this order. My name is Joel Dichter. It's my pleasure to appear before you once again. This is maybe, I don't know how many years in a row, but quite a few that I've had the privilege of representing the upstate communities in these rate proceedings. Our clients include many of your wholesale customers in southern Westchester, including Village of Scarsdale, City of Yonkers, White Plains, Mount Vernon, Town of Greenburgh. My notes say, my prepared statement says United Water, Westchester, but that should be Suez now. And as well as their territories that they serve, which is Rye Brook, Portchester, portions of the City of Rye, New Rochelle, Mamaroneck, Pelham, Pelham Manor, Tuckahoe, Dobbs Ferry, Ardsley, Hastings-on-Hudson, and Bronxville, as well as Westchester Joint Waterworks, which serves portions of towns of Harrison, Mamaroneck, Village of Mamaroneck, and portions of the City of Rye and New Rochelle. Throughout the statement, I'll refer to them collectively as our Upstate Coalition or the Upstate Communities. We do appreciate the report being released earlier this year, as it assists the communities with planning for any changes in rates, and it's something we have been requesting for some time now, so we do appreciate that. On the other hand, having the hearing only a few weeks after gives us less time to prepare our analysis of the report and to make our presentation to you today with an in-depth analysis. Nevertheless, we will proceed as best we can. It's now been 25 of the 26 last years that the upstate communities have been subjected to rate increases. The Upstate report for fiscal year 2017, prepared by Amawalk Consulting Group, shows that going back to 1994, the rate was $165.23 a million gallons. Here it's proposed to go to $1,750.52 per million gallons for fiscal year 17. The increase this year is thankfully significantly less than the 9.87% increase from last year. While we appreciate that the proposal is an increase of 1.25% this year, which, as you noted, is significantly less than the 4.6% projected last year, we believe the increase in the entitlement rate could be avoided altogether. In fact, if the board was applying generally accepted rate-making principles, there would be no increase and possibly a reduction. I'll touch more on that subject in a bit, but you may know some of the reasons from prior appearances before the board, for which we still urge some of those same adjustments. Our main focus is on the excess rate. Unlike the entitlement rate as established by the water board using a cost study, the excess rate is simply set equal to the in-city retail rate, which includes all the distribution costs and other costs of operating billing costs within the city, none of which are incurred in providing wholesale water to the upstate communities. Proposed excess rate hike is 2.1% to 5,253 cents per million gallon. That again would be the same percentage of rates we are proposed to increase for in-city customers. The excess rate, therefore, is nearly 3 times the proposed entitlement rate, and therefore is set at 300% of the cost of providing entitlement water. The excess rate results in payments of some $14 million above the entitlement rate by the upstate communities, deterring economic growth in those communities and the use of funds for needed social services. Rather than a myopic view on just water supply, we would urge the city to weigh the relative impact of the excess rate that is established with no relation to costs, with the loss of millions of dollars to local governments and their constituents to use for other needed purposes. At last year's meeting of the Water Board, it was stated that rate consultants for the Water Board were being asked to find ways to soften the impact of the excess rate on upstate communities. That was Mr. Long's words. We had hoped to see such a proposal incorporated into this year's report and rate proposals. Unfortunately, no such proposal was forthcoming. Alternatively, we had hoped our discussion would lead to some amicable resolution of this issue, but no excess rate relief has been offered. Thus, we are left in the same position with our option to pursue our pending petitions before the New York Public Service Commission and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation to review the entitlement and excess rates. This is not the course that we wish to pursue, and we wish we could work something out, but after many years of discussions, we've had no proposal to provide any relief on the excess rate. We find the Water Board's position on excess rates to be akin to the lion forgetting that it was the mouse that removed a thorn from its foot. Some historical perspective on the issue. The New York State Water Supply Act of 1905 and subsequent amendments granted New York City the authority to develop the reservoir and watershed systems upstate. In exchange for the development rights, New York City was required to deliver water to municipalities and water districts located within 8 counties north of New York City, in which the watersheds are located. This was no small concession on the upstate community's part. The towns of Catskill and Southeast, for example, are now at the bottom of the reservoir. The 1905 Act was established entitlement amounts for each eligible municipality and water district for water to be provided by New York City. Monthly entitlement is established each year based on the particular municipality's population multiplied by the daily per capita consumption within New York City. At the time of the Water Supply Act's enactment in 1905, the average per capita consumption was 125 gallons per day in the Bronx, as compared to New Rochelle's 30 gallons per day. Thus, the legislature believed the entitlement formula would supply far in excess of actual needs. Since that time, overall usage in the city has declined sharply due to the loss of manufacturing, changing demographics, universal metering, maybe automated remote meter reading, and conservation programs. Similarly, for upstate communities, there have been both population growth and declining overall consumption. Since upstate communities have long been metered and have some manufacturing still, upstate decline has not been as sharp within the city. What is the impact of all the above? Is that the entitlement quantities yielded by the formula are declining, even though upstate populations are rising and overall usage is declining. Since entitlement is calculated by multiplying the in-city per capita usage by the upstate community's population, the entitlement amount falls and excess quantity rises, even though upstate communities are conserving, as evidenced by declining consumption over many years. The impact is rising excess bills despite lower per capita usage. The overall non-intended impact of the reduced consumption will be to increase the entitlement rate as rising costs are divided by smaller quantities to be achieved through conservation. At the same time, more entitlement water will be reclassified as excess and charged at the penal rate. Thus, conservation by the communities oddly acts as a penalty, resulting in higher entitlement rates, less entitlement quantities, and higher excess charges. Despite these facts, the upstate communities are still undertaking measures to conserve further and are participating in the city's programs to reduce consumption even further for the West Branch cutover and Water for the Futures program. As you noted, Westchester Joint Waterworks, Scarsdale, Greenberg, Suez, Mount Vernon are all participating in that program. So let's put this above discussion in a more real-world perspective. As all of the costs of water supply to the city are already included and recovered in the entitlement rate, there is zero additional cost to the city from supply of excess. Nevertheless, the excess rate has increased from $2,000 in 2003 to over $5,200 as proposed for fiscal year 17. Meanwhile, the city of Yonkers, for example, has seen its entitlement quantities reduced by more than 1/3 in the last 20 years, and now experiences excess consumption charges of $2 to $3 million annually. Yonkers can ill afford to pay the city those funds, which reduce its ability to meet the other needs of its residents. The other communities also have a declining entitlement and higher excess costs, taking up valuable available funds to be used only for excess purposes and not for other purposes. As shown, upstate communities are already conserving and should not be penalized for doing so. An excess rate at threefold of the entitlement rate serves no purpose to punish upstate communities even though they have done nothing wrong. They should instead be rewarded for providing the land for the reservoir system, reducing consumption, and sharing in the overall cost of operation of the reservoir. We do not object to having higher rates for usage in excess of entitlement. However, rather than a jump to 300% of costs, we propose an inverted rate structure. Under our conservation-minded but fair proposal, uses up to 10% in excess of a community's entitlement rate would be charged at 105% of the entitlement rate. Usage between 10% and 20% of entitlement quantity would be charged at 110% of the entitlement rate. This would continue in 10% bands up to usage in excess of 50% of the allowable entitlement quantity. All usage in excess of 50% of the community's entitlement quantity would be priced at 130% of the entitlement rate. This rate design is far more in keeping with accepted rate-making practices in non-desert areas and sets a real and proper price and conservation signal to users. This proposal will have no material impact on the city's revenues, but have a tremendous favorable impact on the upstate communities. At the same time, it would provide better incentives for the communities to try and stay in within the lower bands than just going from an entitlement rate jumping up to 300% excess rate. We urge the board to accept it and put this issue behind us so we can better use our time and efforts to collectively focus on meeting all of our water needs for the future. With respect to the entitlement rates, the rate hike is set at 1.25%, despite the fact that the rate is recovering a substantial carryover from last year related to cash used for construction efforts, fees and bond. Back in 2011, the city and upstate communities entered into an historic agreement to end years of pending petitions before DEC concerning entitlement rates. That agreement has now expired. But as part of that agreement, the city agreed to perform a true-up of budget amounts for costs of operating the water system with actual costs and to adjust rates prospectively to reflect the difference. For example, actual costs for fiscal year 12 were compared to forecast for fiscal year 12. The over-under recovery of costs was adjusted to fiscal year 14 rates. For several years, this trip inured to the benefit of upstate communities. Then it changed substantially in the city's favor when the Water Board began using available cash for construction and defeasance of bonds in amounts well above those budgeted. Due to the discretionary use of cash for construction and defeasance in fiscal year 14 in an amount that was hundreds of millions of dollars above the forecast upon which rates were set, the city showed a $40 million shortfall in its collections from upstate customers in fiscal year 14. Realizing the impact of a recovery of such an amount in 1 year, we kindly agreed to phase in the recovery over 4 years beginning last year. Now the same holds true this year, with a true-up of actual amounts spent on construction and defeasance with forecast amounts for fiscal year 15. Again, the Water Board is proposing to recover another $40 million shortfall over 4 years approximately. Thus, rates for fiscal year 17 include $10 million from the fiscal year 14 true-up and another $10 million from the fiscal year 15 reconciliation. Despite this additional $20 million, rates are still going up by only 1.25%. So we investigated in the short time available to see how it was that you could have a $20 million recovery from the true-up, yet rates are only being proposed to increase by 1.25%. What we see is that major expense items have in fact declined, for which we give you much credit for having that impact. Other than personnel services costs have declined, property taxes declined in 15, interest rates are lower, so debt cost has declined, and usage was higher than forecast, so there are higher revenues. Thus, one would ordinarily expect to see no increase or even a rate decline this year. Which brings us full circle back to the true-up of actual cash used for construction and early retirement bonds. While we agree that in proper amounts and with proper rate-making treatment, use of cash for these purposes is certainly laudable. It's the manner in which it's being done here that we question. Your rate consultant, Amawalk, points out in its report that the rate-making method being used to reflect the use of cash to retire bonds results in higher short-range costs to achieve long-range savings. This is illustrated in the chart at page 36 of their report, which I've attached to the back of this statement. The table clearly demonstrates the harm to current ratepayers and the benefit or boon to future ratepayers. It is wrong to assume that today's customers and customers in 2023 and beyond will be one and the same. But that's what your rate treatment does. The table shows that the cost of defeasance for fiscal year 11 through fiscal year 16 is some $2.75 billion. Assuming the board continues the 4-year spreading out of costs, that would mean customers through no later than fiscal year 19 would pay the entirety of the $2.75 billion. Because I assume we're going to have the same issue next year, where there's going to be another shortfall in another 4-year phase. In that same period, the reduction in debt service costs would be $1.35 billion. So customers from fiscal year 11 through 19, or it's really a shorter period than that, will have paid $2.75 billion to retire debt bonds. But the savings for those customers in that period would be $1.3 billion. So they will, in essence, be paying twice as much cost as the savings. In contrast, the savings total $3.85 billion will accrue to customers well beyond 2022. So indeed, the majority of savings will occur after 2022. It's roughly 50-50%. So those customers coming online, coming on stream in 2022 and beyond, will enjoy the bulk of the savings and have paid none of the cost that resulted in those savings. It's a classic rate-making mismatch and an unjust and unreasonable practice. Similarly, the use of roughly $250 million of cash to pay for construction that will have a useful life of 30 years or more has the same deficiencies. So as customers are being asked to pay today for projects that will benefit customers 30, 50 years, 80 years down the road, depending on the life cycle of that project. So what can you do about it? First of all, the true-up agreed by the parties in 2011 was never intended to provide the city a mechanism to recover the discretionary use of extra cash. Rather, it was to protect the parties from over or under forecasting out-of-pocket costs beyond the city's reasonable control, such as chemical costs, union labor costs, other maintenance costs, property taxes, and the like. Many of these costs have recently gone down. So instead of reducing rates due to the over-budgeting of these items, the city is using the true-up to recover its deficiency. It's using the true-up to recover its discretionary decision to use cash instead of debt to pay for construction or retired debt. We have no objection against the use of such cash, as it obviously has benefits to do so, but it should not be included in the true-up, as that was not its intended purpose. Further, as the benefit and early retirement of debt are principally realized after 2022, it's a typo, the cost should be spread out not over 4 years, but 10, 20, or whatever the remaining life of the retired debt would be, or an average of such retired debt. That would be just and reasonable to today's customers and also be fair to future customers. A couple of quick other items before I finish up. The report uses a 3% general inflation factor, which is above what currently being experienced, and one reason why some of those costs may be over forecast. Lastly, the rate-making treatment of excess revenues has also recently come to our attention. All the costs of providing to upstate communities is recovered through the entitlement rate. Any collection from excess rate customers should be used to offset or reduce the entitlement rate. In sum, we recommend that there be no increase in the entitlement rate this year. The true-up should be limited to costs beyond the board's reasonable control and not the discretionary spending of excess cash. Without the true-up, the reduction in entitlement rate for fiscal year 17 would be a reduction of about $50 per million gallons. The current rate would climb to approximately $1,674 per million gallons. But we're not asking for a reduction. Rather, a reduction, we would request that the savings be accrued and applied to any future increase to offset that amount. With regard to cash used for construction to retire bonds, irrespective of the true-up, the costs must be spread out among all those that will benefit from savings on debt costs or the useful life of the project funded with cash. Lastly, most importantly, the excess rate remains by far our primary concern. Upstate communities are already decreasing consumption, working with the city to conserve for the West Branch cutover. The community should not be penalized for doing so through an excess rate that is harming the community, sends improper price and conservation signals, and has no relation to cost. Adoption of our proposed inverted rate structure will send the same or even a better incentive to conserve without unfairly penalizing your upstate partners. Thank you. Listen to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Director. And if I might just say, thank you for the comment that in 1905, the consumption in the Bronx was 125 gallons per capita per day. As you can find in our comprehensive annual financial report from last year, the in-city per capita consumption still averages about 123 gallons per day. So that seems pretty consistent with 1905, so thank you for that statistic. We did mention at the Water Board meeting on June 12th last year that we would have the rate consultant evaluate ways to soften the effects of the excess charges if such was feasible. And as you have commented, our real goal right now is reducing consumption in advance of the Valhalla West Branch shutdown. Our main and only way to control consumption, other than working with the communities, is through the rate setting process. So we would prefer to soften the burden of excess charges by helping the communities not go into excess at all, which if the in-city consumption has pretty much stayed stable since 1905, it would seem like that could potentially be possible. And we also this year considered applying the excess revenues as an offset to the entitlement rate cost of service as a way to benefit all customers financially while leaving the excess rate-based incentive to conserve in place. But that is still not an ideal solution because the reduction in the entitlement rate would not encourage a reduction in consumption. So we understand your concerns regarding the excess rate and those of all of the wholesale customers, and we are continuing to work on ways to address that. And in terms of the defeasance, if you look at, yes, $2.7 billion was spent on defeasance in the 5 years from 2011 through 2016. That is less than 2 times. That's if we're spending $1.8 billion a year on new money debt service, that's less than we spend on new money issuance. Excuse me, it's less than we spend in a 2-year period. So we have a tremendous amount of debt outstanding for the system, and the buyback of debt and the refinancing of outstanding debt are part of the overall financial plan for the system. So thank you. If you'd like to re-comment, you're welcome to. If you guys want to put that.
I don't mean to have the last one, but I would fine. Then you can have the last one. As far as the excess rate, what we're proposing, we do not believe in any way will reduce the incentive for conservation. It's already there. It's always there. In fact, going to an inverted rate structure that has more proper price signals, and the economists will tell you, will do a better job of conveying the message that you should conserve here, rather than just saying a rate that's way up here from here. It doesn't necessarily have the same effect. If you put in effect bands of usage above the entitlement that are more fairly priced, you will have just as much or better price signal to say, okay, now I have 5 steps I need to get below, right? If I go from 10 to 20, if I'm 10% over or 20% over, if I can get down to that next band, I'm going to see savings. As opposed to if I'm 30% above and I have to get all the way below entitlement to get any saving, I'm going to have to say, well, does it make sense for me to invest to get there? I can't actually ever get there. But if you have a band that's like your typical usage is 20% above entitlement in a summer month, and you see if you can get that down just a little bit, you'll get down to the next band. You have a better price, a better way to achieve conservation, and you'll have better results than you have on the current pricing methodology. It's not just always the highest price is going to have the least usage. That's not true. This is a better way of getting down to that. And so that, we really wish you would go back and look at that a little closer. And I know it's just a proposal I put before you today. So I would ask you not to just push it aside and say it doesn't make sense in terms of trying to conserve for the cutover. I think it actually will better job of helping you get to achieve your goals. And we're asking you to go back and look at it. On the debt defeasance, we've been through it a few years. I think this chart clearly shows that the cost should be spread out among the years of the savings. It doesn't have any real impact in the city to do so. You're still going to recover the costs over time, but you're going to cover them as the savings are being achieved, and the benefits are then fairly allocated instead of getting them all up front. Thank you.
Well, thank you. At this point in the meeting, I've just asked if anyone else has a question or comment.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on the concept of whether, rates, money, pricing affects consumption. And my own personal experience, working with a number of Long Island communities, my prior position, they were affluent communities that regardless of what the price was, if it was a $3 million house or a $10 million house, they were going to water that lawn no matter what. They weren't going to let it go brown. And many communities had to spend millions of dollars on additional tank storage in order to meet the demand. So there are a number of examples where just because the water is more expensive, the consumption will be cut, especially in the more affluent and well-to-do areas. I think Southern California and the Southwest are a good example. The way to cut consumption is not so much by pricing, but by requirements that include rain sensors, smart controls for irrigation systems, and that's outdoors for irrigation uses, and then indoors, shower heads, low flow toilets, etc. That, I believe, is really the way to go to decrease consumption per capita, and not so much the rate. Unfortunately, when it comes to household bills, while we're talking about a lot of money, the homeowner really reacts when they see a big bill because of the leak. So leak detection is really what it is. So there are many other ways of getting to, in my opinion, conservation and reduction in use other than just pricing.
Well, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? No one else? I'd just like to remind everyone that written remarks can be submitted to the New York City Water Board by mail. The address is 59-17 Junction Boulevard, 8th floor, Flushing, New York, 11373. They can also be emailed. The email address is nyc.dep.nyc.gov. That's G-O-V. And please submit any written remarks no later than 5 p.m. on May 12th. And as we have no further business, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.